I love this question. Should developers use shared or dedicated database development environments? And we have a little fact that we're going to start out with from the 2019 State of Database DevOps report. We asked survey respondents, do you do database development work in a shared environment or in dedicated environments? And 46% said everything is shared. 35% said some of each. Only 19% said we just use dedicated environments. So this is not obvious at all how good or bad this is, right? Like, what's the big difference between using this, especially if I have maybe a terabyte database, right? Like, what's the big deal with using a shared database? So is it a bad practice to develop in a shared environment? Using something like automated provisioning makes it much easier for each developer to have their own environment. But what exactly does this make easier and why? Because it's not obvious when you first think about it.
Anderson, were you gonna? Because I'm gonna talk for ages. So
Hamish is like, I have a novel written about this, actually.
Yeah. I'm happy to go second if you want, mate.
I think Anderson has actually frozen. I think this question has stunned him.
I know.
Yeah, so you should go, Hamish.
Alrighty. Look, shared environments, there's arguments on why you may or may not want to use them, because one of the reasons people do use shared environments, because I'm going to it is a bad practice to develop in a shared environment, but I'm going to tell you some of the reasons why people do still do it, and it feels like second nature.
There's a lot of them still doing it, so why is that happening?
Almost half. And I mean, it's because databases are complicated, right? I mean, they're not the most easiest things to get up and running for people. And if I want to set up a web app, it's a couple of DLLs. But having my own dedicated database and having that mirror as close as possible to my prod system. I talked about prod-like before, right? And so setting up that shared environment, hey team, we're going to refresh the shared environment on Sunday night, and you can all have, you can all use it. That's kind of easy, but it's not that easy, because there's a whole heap of issues associated with using a shared database, right? So my change is going to affect your change that you're, do you know what I mean?
Right. Even if I create a branch, if we're using the same database over in my branch, if you modify something that the code isn't in my branch, I'm still going to see it in the database.
Thank you so much. I didn't know whether to start going on my branch rant. But that's the thing, right? Because I was worried if I started talking about branching, most of the DBAs would be like, branching? What's this branching? The thing is one of the reasons we use shared environments like this is because it's so hard to refresh them. It's so hard to get a copy that I know is going to be as close to prod, especially if I have that 1 terabyte database. I don't have a 1 terabyte drive on my laptop, or we don't have 50 terabytes for 50 copies of the database. So I'm sorry, the teams of 50 people out there, you don't get a database each, because so it's bad practice, because my changes will overwrite yours. If you're on another branch, as you said, you don't pick up my changes, and suddenly we've got this mess. And I feel this. So when I started looking at SQL Clone way back when, the thing that got me was I could spin up, first of all, environments that were, exact copies of prod. I did a bit of data mask and whatever. But it took up like 50 megabytes of space initially, right? Because it's a snapshot. It uses some of the same technology that SANs do and whatever. storage, snapshots, whatever. It just does it better because it understands the database.
And the changes, like if we both have a clone created off the same image, the changes that you make to yours will not show up in mine. Our writes are isolated from one another on our particular clones, and they act just like normal databases. So we can have these databases that only take up the amount of space for the amount that we've changed in our database, and we are isolated in our little database. So maybe to clarify, for people who don't understand branching deeply, maybe to clarify, one of the major uses of branching in source control is to provide isolation when developing a feature. So I might create a branch in my source control to work on a change in isolation. Having a dedicated database actually gives me that isolation for databases. Without that, I actually don't have that isolation at all, so that everybody's seeing my stuff before I have any idea whether I want anyone to see my nasty changes or not.
Perfect. And by committing those on a dedicated environment, you make your changes, you commit those changes, and then that change is actually made available to everyone else to have a look at it. It went through the whole test and validation process that every efficient DevOps best practice introduces. So when that change has been validated, and only then that's going to be available for everyone else to collaborate with, not before, not when it's faulty.
Now, if you are a team of 2 people, if you're a team of 2 developers and you sit next to each other at work, the pain of this is going to be less than if you're a team of 4 developers or 6 developers. The pain of this increases as your team size increases. Even with just 2 people, you can create quite a mess, but it gets exponentially worse the larger and larger your team gets. So if you're a team of 2 people and you want to use the object locking feature in SQL source control with a shared database, occasionally you're going to have to be like, can you unlock that stuff? But as your team grows, the pain will get worse.
I always likened it to, because a lot of what we're doing in DevOps for the database, has been evolution of some of what application developers have done, right? So we're suddenly putting our database into source control, we're doing branching and for the isolation, whatever. But I always liken a shared database environment like saying to a team of developers, hey, rather than having all that, all that code on your machine, let's put all your, your C# code or whatever on a network drive, and you can all develop off that. That's madness.
Yeah.
Let's
just use Dropbox. Why use source control at all?
And unit testing.
We're using SharePoint. Oh, that's not funny, is it?
No.
Some jokes aren't funny.
Well, I guess the reason why shared environments became a thing is originally due to the limitations that we discussed earlier around infrastructure and the time that it would take to actually successfully maintain those environments. But again, that's when SQL provision it's a game changer. It removes all those barriers and enhances efficiency on a level that we haven't been used to seeing before.